I have purposefully avoided talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I avoid it completely because, in my mind, it's just states doing state things. It's just not something I'm concerned with, not something that I'm bothered about. I've got no horse in that race. But when a free speech issue does pop up, I do need to say something. Ukraine war, the Russian student under arrest for an Instagram story. University student Olesia Krivstova, I don't know, has been missing a lot of classes. That's because 20-year-old Olesia is under house arrest. She has an electronic tag on her leg, and police can monitor her every move. Her alleged crime: Olesia was arrested for anti-war posts on social media. One of them concerned last October's explosion on the bridge linking Russia to annexed Crimea. I posted an Instagram story about the bridge, Olesia tells the BBC, reflecting on how Ukrainians were happy with what had happened. She had also shared a friend's post about the war. Then the drama began. I was talking on the phone to my mother, Olesia recalls, when I heard the front door opening. Lots of police came in, they took away my phone and shouted at me to lie on the floor. Olesia was charged with justifying terrorism and discrediting the Russian armed forces, and she faces up to 10 years in prison. I never imagined anyone could get such a long prison sentence for posting something on the internet. Ah, neither did I. Alessia says, I'd seen reports of crazy verdicts in Russia, but I hadn't paid much attention and continued to speak out. A student of the Northern Federal University in that sounds like coughing something up. Alessia has now been added to Russia's official list of terrorists and extremists. When I realised I'd been put in the same list as school shooters and the Islamic State group, I thought it was crazy, recalls Alessia. Under the rules of her house arrest, she's banned from talking on the phone and going online. Alessia has a striking image tattooed on her right leg. President Vladimir Putin depicted as a spider with an Orwellian description, Big Brother is watching you. Yeah, fair. It appears that in Alessia's case, it wasn't Big Brother watching her, but fellow students. Ah, yes, the finger men, the ones that have been brought up and raised to snitch on their fellow citizenry against the government. A friend showed me a post about me in chat. Alessia says about how I was against the special military operation. Most of the people in this chat were history students. They were discussing whether to denounce me to the authorities. I see not much has changed in Russia since the 50s and 60s. The BBC has seen extracts from the group chat. In one comment, Alessia is accused of writing provocative posts of a defeatist and extremist character. This is out of place for wartime. It must be nipped in the bud. First, let's try to discredit her. If she doesn't get it, let the security services deal with it. Denunciation is the duty of a patriot, someone else writes. Later, when the list of prosecution witnesses was read out in court, Alessia recognised the names from the student chat. It's 1 year since the Kremlin launched its special military operation in Ukraine, the term it uses for Russia's full-scale invasion of its neighbour. Within weeks of the assault, President Putin was calling on the Russian public to separate true patriots from scum and traitors. Since then, across Russia, there have been reports of Soviet-style denunciations against critics of the war. They include students informing on teachers and workers denouncing colleagues. To be fair, I'll save it for the end. Save it for the end. Public criticism of the invasion, and that includes reposting other people's criticism, is dangerous. The Russian authorities expect total, unflinching support for the offensive in Ukraine. If you don't support it, at the very least, you're expected to stay silent. If you don't stay silent, there's a string of repressive laws for punishing dissent. That includes laws against spreading false information about the military and discrediting the army. In a giant portrait of a Russian soldier killed in Ukraine stares down on the city from the side of a 9-story apartment block, along with the words, "Being a warrior means living forever." The patriotic messaging is persuasive on the streets of whatever the hell that is. We find little sympathy for Russians facing prosecution for their anti-war comments. People who discredit our army or spread fakes, they're sick in the head, Konstantin tells me. They should be sent to the front line as cannon fodder. I have a negative attitude to critics in the special operation, Ekaterina tells me, but a long prison sentence for posting something online isn't that harsh, I ask. People should use their brains, Ekaterina replies. If they live in this country, if they enjoy all the benefits this country has to offer, if they are patriots, they need to abide by the law. Everyone's starting to realise why I really don't like states. Later that day, Alessia is allowed out of her flat, but only to attend a court hearing. Her defence lawyers are trying to persuade a judge to lift the restrictions on her movement. Alessia's t-shirt sports a picture of a police van with school bus written on it, a comment on how young Russians are being punished for their criticism of the authorities. The judge rules to keep her under house arrest. The state doesn't have the stomach for debate or for democracy or freedom, Alessia says, but they can't put everyone in prison. At some point, they'll run out of cells. I don't know, man. During the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Russia was putting absolutely fucking everyone in prison, and they didn't run out of cells. They just put more people in each cell and then built more cells. Right, so even though, right, I avoid the Russia-Ukraine conflict, like, this is a display of weakness. I've always said that. See, whenever states start going after people for directly criticising the state or things the state is doing, it's a display of weakness. It's a show of weakness. So if you want to have yourself perceived as a strong state with a strong leader, then show no fear in the face of such comments. Show no fear. But, unfortunately, you did, and it's a sign of weakness. That is... I say that. I know I say that a lot, but it is a sign of weakness. But one thing to point out as well: Ukraine aren't angels in this either. Ukraine has essentially banned all political opposition, and they are also arresting people for the things that they say about Ukraine. And if you're pro-Russia, you can get arrested and all that type of stuff, right? So, again, I get it. Like, everyone sort of goes, well, wartime rules. You know, like that thing when you were on patrol and one of your guys died and there was absolutely no food. You know, so you did what you had to do in order to survive, and even though technically what you did was a little bit of a war crime, your sergeants and stuff like that, when you get back to base, will just go, yeah, wartime rules. Things are different during a war. You kind of have a little bit of a pass to do things that are just morally reprehensible, you know? Because, well, hey, there's a war on. I've actually got a video coming out soon talking about the pet killings that were done. Basically, Britain ordered people to kill their pets because food rationing was a thing. And pets just were a cost that they couldn't afford. They didn't want to and couldn't afford to pay. They need the food for the people. There's not enough food for the pets, so shit tons of people started killing their pets. But it's not looked back on with any kind of horror or anything like that. Everyone's like, yeah, well, there was a war on. There was a war on. And yeah, that is the case with Russia and Ukraine. Both sides are in a war, so obviously things are very tense. Things are very, you could probably wouldn't be able to fit a fucking cigarette paper between Putin and Zelensky's arse cheeks right now. But I just think that whenever you do stuff like this, it is a massive display of weakness. It is. But again, both Russia and Ukraine are doing the exact same thing. Again, I don't have a side in the war. I just really don't like states.